Hello, welcome to Excel training. Today we are going to see a very important topic as far as Excel is concerned, pivot tables. Right, so here are the list of topics which we are going to see today. Pivot table options, how to create a pivot table once if you have a database. Based on that database, how to create a pivot table. Once you create a pivot table, using that, how to create multiple pivot tables, and some of the basic options related to pivot tables, and design and formatting options related to pivot tables, how to delete a pivot, and what is slicer options in pivot table, what is timeline option in pivot, what are calculated fields, how exactly we create a calculated field in pivot, how to group ungroup all the options, all the columns in a pivot, and how to create a pivot chart once your pivot table is ready. Right, so we're going to see all these options one by one. Let's get started. So this is one small database we're going to start with to create a pivot table, right? So shortcut key to create pivot table is Alt NV. Alt NV. Alt NV is a shortcut key to create a pivot table. Alternatively, if you want to create it normally, you can click anywhere inside your database and go to Insert, and you have the very first option called Pivot Table, right? So I'll just have to click on Pivot Table. I'm clicking on that, and this window will open, wherein we have to suggest some options here. As my cursor is already present inside my database, so it will assume this entire thing as your database. If it is correct, then we can just leave it like that. If it is a continuous set of data set, then it'll automatically pick up the entire data. Yes. Then the next option is whether you want to create the pivot table in the existing worksheet or in a new worksheet. Okay. So let's say in this case, I'm going to create a pivot table in a new worksheet. I'm going to give like that. Okay. So those are a few options, and then you have to click on OK to start with the pivot table. I'm just clicking on OK here, right? So you observe here, before the database, that is in sheet 1, one new sheet gets created, and this window is called pivot cache, where you can start dragging and dropping your columns to create a pivot table. So pivot table actually is a easy way to represent your data however you want. Okay, so here most probably there are no formulas required. You just have to drag and drop the options such that you can create a report instantly, just to calculate some fields based on all your columns. That's what we're going to do using pivot table. So let's say, just go through this column names. We have this invoice numbers, we have some date, sales representatives who perform those invoices, and for which product they performed, and what is the price, units, and sales. So this is what we have in our database, and I have to drag my columns accordingly to create a pivot. Okay, so let's say I want my sales representatives to be in rows. In this uh, small window, you can observe there are 4 different sections in your pivot, right? So there's something called rows and columns. So which column you want to be in rows while creating your pivot, so that column you have to drag it inside your rows. Same way, which column you want it to be in the columns, you have to drag it inside your columns. And you have a section called values, where all the numerical data goes. That means all the calculations you perform, on which column you want your calculations to be performed, that column has to go under values, right? And filter represents the filter. The name suggests it's a filter for the entire pivot table, right? So I want to filter the entire pivot table with a particular column, then I can drag your particular column here. So I'll start with sales representative to be dragged in my rows, I just select the sales representative and drag it inside my rows. Okay, and you see at the left hand side of your screen, you can see all the sales representatives are sitting inside the rows, right? Same way, I want products to be displayed in my columns. So I just select and drag my products inside my columns. Okay. So instantly you will get all the products in your columns. Okay. And I want to see a summarized data based on the total sales, right? So I just drag this sales to my values. By default, it takes sum of sales because that's what actually we are going to see now. Sum of sales is what we wanted. So it takes sum of sales. So instantly with just 2-3 clicks, you can create a report without any complicated formulas or anything. Okay, so a pivot table is nothing but a representation of data in a proper format, calculation of your data in a specified format. Okay, that's what your pivot table is all about. Okay, so I instantly got a pivot table with sales representatives in my rows and products in my columns. Okay, so advantage with pivot tables is you can always change the way you represent your data. Let's say I want products to be in rows, I can simply drag it here, and sales representatives to be in columns, I can drag it this way. So instantly you can flip your table however you want, and your data is ready within no time. So that's how flexible your pivot table is. For doing the same thing with a formula, is it's little time taking, but as the logic grows, that means if your table gets complicated, the formulas becomes more complicated, and it gets very difficult to construct a table using formulas. So with pivot tables, it's just 1 or 2 clicks, just you drag and drop wherever you want, and your pivot table is ready. Okay, so that's a very simple way of representing your pivot table. And we discussed about filter as well. So I have this table, this entire table. Let's say I want to filter it with my uh, let's say invoice number. Okay, so I go to invoice number and drag it inside my filters. Okay, so this is a high-end filter for the entire pivot table, wherein you select the invoice number. For that particular invoice number, who has performed how much sales in what region, that data can be represented. So I just say select multiple items to select multiple invoices. So let's say I select some 2-3 invoices. I want to just check for those 3 invoices what are all the sales performed in a specified region for a specified sales step. So I click on OK. Now this is what happens. So for those multiple items which we selected, those invoice numbers which I selected, this is the output. This is the resultant data. Okay, so you can even select a single invoice, or you can select multiple invoice based on whatever your requirement is and how you want to filter your data. So for this particular invoice, Majestic is the Majestic is the product, and Joe is the person who worked for that particular product, and this is the total sales. Okay, so that is a basic way of representing your pivot table. I'm just removing this filter as of now. I just drag it back and that filter gets removed. Okay, so once this pivot table is ready, uh, when you drag your sales column to your values, it says by default sum of sales. Okay, so instead of sum of sales, let's say I want count of sales. Okay, I can click on that. I have an option called value field settings. Value field settings, I can select that, and I can change this to count of sales, average of sales, maximum, minimum. All these different options are available here. Okay, so let's say now I want a table. I want this table for sum of sales, count of sales, and average of sales. 3 tables I wanted. Okay, so what I can do is I can simply go to the leftmost part of your pivot table, and your cursor changes to that black side arrow kind of a thing. Just select that, your entire pivot gets selected. Copy, Control C, come down wherever you want and paste, Control V. I pasted it once and I am pasting it twice. Second time Control V. Okay, so totally I have now three tables. Now this is for sum of sales. Okay, now this table I want to change it for count of sales. So I keep my cursor here, go to here under values, select this option, say value field settings, and instead of sum just say count, and it changes instantly to count of sales. Okay, I'm going to my third table, and in the third table again I go to this option called value field settings and make it average of sales. Click on this. Okay, instantly it becomes average of sales. So within no time I could create three tables, one for sum of sales, one for count of sales, and one for average of sales. Okay, so it's just a drag and drop options, and just changing a few options you can create your table instantly, right? So that's one option for you. And once you select your pivot table, once you click on your pivot table, you get two additional options here. One is analyze, one is design, right? So I'm going to click on design first and see some of the design options. Okay, so let's start from here. You have something called grand totals and subtotals here. You see here there is something called grand total, right? So as this grand totals, I want subtotals also. Okay, so such that this table grows. So what I'll do, I'll take subtotals as well. For taking subtotals, I will take invoice number again into my rows. Okay, so it's not that I can only drag one column here. I can drag multiple columns as well, right? So I create one more pivot. Okay, I'll create one more pivot in the same sheet, let's say. Okay, so I go to the data table again. I do shortcut Alt NV. Okay, so this thing comes and I'm going to create my pivot in the existing sheet itself. So I select existing sheet and click somewhere in your sheet and click OK. Fine. So I create the same table once again. Now in the now what I'll do, I'll create two row columns, that is sales rep and invoice number, right? So sales rep here and invoice number as well. So for each sales rep, what are the invoice numbers they have performed, and I want to see the total sales as well correspondingly. So for each product, so product will be dragged in my columns, and sales I'm dragging it in my values, right? So only additional thing what I've done here is by dragging my invoice number as well inside my rows, such that I get subtotals as well. That's what I wanted. I want to generate these subtotals and I can delete it later. So that's the main agenda behind doing this. So I go to design, I go to subtotals here. In the subtotals, you have these options. Do not show subtotals, show subtotals at the bottom, show subtotals at the top. In this case, subtotals are at the top. If I don't want subtotals to be shown, I can say do not show subtotals, and all the subtotals are vanished. Only the grand totals are present. Okay, so like this, you can keep your subtotals, or if you don't want, you can just remove them as well, right? So I've kept it at the bottom, right? You can even keep the subtotals on top. Anything is fine, right? So that's about subtotal. Same way, grand totals. I here in this case I am representing my grand totals as well, which I don't want. Let's say I want to remove those grand totals. I can select and say off for rows and columns. Your grand totals are removed. Only the subtotals are being displayed, right? So you can on and off whatever is required, right? So in this case, I have my subtotals and grand totals displayed. Now you can observe one more thing here. You can see something called row labels and column labels. Here, in fact, in my row labels, I have my sales rep names. In my columns, I have products. But instead of representing that, it is representing as row labels and column labels. Which, let's say, if you're sending this report to somebody else, it's difficult to identify what this row labels and column labels says, right? So if I want to change this accordingly, then I can go to this report layout and I can say show in tabular form. I select show in tabular form. Now you observe it says sales reps and it says product. Instead of row labels and column labels, it says sales rep and products. Now your table is much more clear uh, in a way it understands. But thing is that you get additional column here, right? Previously this invoice numbers are under sales reps. Okay, now one more column has been generated because it identifies what are all columns are there. It splits accordingly and it displays it separately. Okay, so if you don't want that, if you want normal, then you can show as compact view and it comes back to the normal view, right? So it all depends on what view you want under design tab, right? So that's about it. If you have blank rows and if you don't want to uh, you know if you want to remove those blanks and all, you can use this option. Pretty straightforward, right? Now here comes your design options again. You have this basic boring color in your pivot. If you want more stylish way of representing your pivots, you can always come here and change your colors here, right? uh, let's say I select one of these options with this. It looks a lot better than previous, right? So you can always change whatever design you want. I can come here, go to design and select any one of these options, right? So based on whatever choice you want, you can just select any of these. Or if you want a new style to be created, you didn't like any of these options, you want to create your own style, then you can still do that. Create new keyword style, you can go here and select any one of these options. It says header row, it says top first column, second column, uh, first row stripe, first column, all those options you have, and you can give a color, border, whatever it displays here. Okay, so I'll just show one option here. Let's say I want for header row some color. I say format, right, and go to your fill and give some color. Let's say I give this and check out, right? It's being displayed here, so it will preview what exactly you're doing. Let's say for first column I want to give some other color, let's say green. I click OK, right? So it comes like this. So you can create your own style of your choice where if you don't like any of the default, but most of the cases your default style works fine, right? I just click on cancel. I don't want to create a new one, so I'm just canceling it. So that's what your design options. Those are some of the design options available inside your pivot table, right? So go back to sheet 5. Here we have three different pivot tables: one for sum of sales, one for count of sales, one for average of sales, right? Now, let's say I'm going to create a report filter, that is filter for this particular table, for the first pivot table, right? So what I'll do, I'll just drag my invoice number here. Okay. Now, see here, when I drag invoice number, it got selected 10500 by default, and this invoice number filter is applicable only for this particular table. I have two other tables here. Okay, so but that filter is not getting applied for these two tables. Only it is applying for the very first table. Okay, now if you want a filter wherein you can select for one pivot table and it gets applied for all the remaining tables. Okay, then instead of using your normal filter, you can use another filter called slicer. Okay, very useful option in pivot. Slicer, how to create a slicer, let's see. Okay, so I'm just removing this filter back. Now I go to uh, analyze tab. Under pivot, I just select any one pivot here and go to your analyze tab. You have an option here called insert slicer, right? So let's click on that insert slicer. It shows all the columns available in your master data. And let's say I'm going to create a pivot for, sorry, slicer for invoice number. So I select this invoice number and click OK, right? Now this is called a slicer. This particular window is called a slicer. Uh, Look and feel wise, it's a lot better compared to your normal filter. Uh, just by selecting any one invoice number, your entire data gets changed here. See, uh, and once you want to clear everything, just click on this. uh, all the invoice numbers get selected. So you have slicer options separately. When you click on a slicer, you get this options window separately only for slicer. Again, you can give separate give colors for your slicers. I can just select any one of these of your choice. Okay, so let's select this. Okay, so whenever you select one of the invoice number, that particular invoice number will be colored and rest will be grayed out. Okay, that's one option. And one more thing, you have this slicer here wherein I want to align this data in two columns or three columns, how many ever columns you want. Let's say I can go to here, I have something called columns here. Let's say I want to align it in a two columns. Select enter, and the slicer has been changed to two columns. Okay, so I can just drag here and your slicer is here. Okay, so it says invoice number slicer. It need not be the case that you create only one slicer. You can create multiple slicers as well. I can go to insert slicer once again under analyze by clicking on your pivot table. Analyze. I can select one more slicer as well. Let's say I want date slicer. I can click on date and click OK. So it will create one more slicer. Like this, you can create any number of slicers of your choice. It depends on your requirement. So I just delete this second slicer called date slicer. As of now, I want only one slicer, that is invoice number slicer. Okay, now as I mentioned, if I click on this slicer 10500 invoice number, only this table is getting changed. The other two tables are not getting changed, correct? Now I want to link this particular slicer to the other two tables, right? I can do that using slicer option. So I go keep my cursor inside my second table, and under analyze, I have an option called filter connections, right? Filter connections. I click on that, and I have one filter already created, slicer, or we call it as filter, whatever it is. I select this. This is the invoice number slicer I already created, that I want to link it to the second table. So I check on this, click OK. So now even this table got linked to this slicer. I'm going to do it for one more time. For this third table, I click on this table, go to analyze and filter connections, and just select that, click OK. Now you observe all the three tables are linked. I'll just minimize the zoom to visualize what is happening. Now you can see two tables here. Um, Now I select two invoices, and instantly both these, in fact, all the three tables are getting changed. You can see all the three tables are getting changed. So now this invoice number slicer is linked with all the tables. So one filter, multiple tables get changed. Okay, so that's a very good option. Modern databases, modern dashboards, everywhere people use the slicers in a very effective way. Look and feel wise also, it's a very good option. Okay, now that's the slicer option. Same way we have another option called timeline. Okay, now this timeline option is new in 2013 and 16. It's not there in older versions. So if you are working in an advanced version of Excel, you will be able to see this option called insert timeline. Okay, so insert timeline is will work only on dates, right? As the name suggests, it's a timeline, right? Timeline refers to dates and times. Okay, now if at all your database contains a date column, you can use this. You can select this time. So I'm going to insert a timeline. I have a column called date column. I just select that and see it only displays the date column. Excel is very intelligent enough to identify which is date columns, and it will only give those columns here. I click on this, click on right? So this is a timeline. Okay. Timeline is also one kind of a filter where you can actually select months, you can select dates, you can select quarters, or however your data you want to represent, you can select it accordingly. Okay. Now I can see 2017 here. I can even see 2016, right? So 2 years I can see, and inside that we have months, because there is a default option called months. Okay, let's say I give only years will come. Let's say I click on 2016, only 2016 data will be displayed. I say 2017, only 2017 data will be displayed. Okay, so however you can connect this to other tables as well. So like that you can connect your uh, filters accordingly. This is called timeline. You can change this to months, quarters, year, whatever of your choice, and you can just by selecting your data will be displayed accordingly. Right. So this is now in this case it is only linked to table one. You can still link this to table two as well. Go to table two again. Go to analyze filter connections. Now I have two filters, right? One for invoice number, one for date. Now I'm going to select this date as well and connect it for the second table. Now you select the quarters or months or whatever, your second table also gets changed accordingly, right? So like that you can link for any number of tables existing in your database, in your pivots, and link it accordingly. So that's slicers and timelines. Sometimes in slicers, you don't see these headers, right? Uh, that means you can hide these headers as well, right? So I'm going to right click on this, and there's an option called slicer settings, right? So I click on this slicer settings, and display header is checked here. If I remove that, your header will not be displayed. Okay. And there are some filter options available here. You can just check it out. Here it says hide items with no data, right? So when I select one particular item in your slicer, the other things are getting grayed out, right? So instead of getting grayed out, I don't want to display them at all. Okay, then you can say hide items with no data. I can select that, click OK. So now you observe here the header has been gone, and if I click on this, okay, and if there is a corresponding parallel data, if you have one more slicer, okay, I'll show you that. Let's select everything as of now. Right, I'm going to select one more slicer. I just removed this timeline as of now, and create one more slicer for your table just to display the dependency. So I say analyze, I go to insert slicer, I take date as a slicer instead of a timeline. I take it as a slicer only, and fine. So I click on one invoice number, and here I say right click, slicer settings, hide data with no items, and I don't want to display header. Click OK. Now you observe, if I click on any one particular invoice number, whichever data corresponding to that invoice, only that data gets displayed. Previously, all the dates were getting displayed. Now, as I have hidden the data which is not corresponding, it will not display here. So this is a primary slicer. So here all the data is displayed because I'll have to select any one invoice at one particular time. But this is a dependent slicer on this particular slicer. So whenever you select one invoice or multiple invoice, correspondingly whichever dates available for those invoice numbers, only those will be displayed. Others will not be displayed. Okay, so that's one good option as far as slices are concerned. Yes, fine. Next option is refresh here. Problem with pivot tables is they don't get refreshed automatically. Whenever your source data is changed, okay, so by any chance your source data is changing every day, your pivots will not get refreshed automatically. You'll have to come manually refresh your pivots. Okay, I'll have to come right click on this and say refresh. Okay, then only your pivot tables get refreshed, or you can even refresh it from here as well. Okay, again, whenever your source data is changed, your number of rows and number of columns got increased, and your source data has to be changed, then you can change it from here. Okay, in this case it is like this. Let's say if I insert two more columns, and then those two columns also needs to be included, then you'll have to come here and change it. Okay, so let's do that. I'll just add one more column, right? Let me say Control R and change it to R sales. Just give some data. Now my new column is called R sales. Now, but if I go back and see in my pivot table, you don't see that column called R sales. It not automatically gets updated, right? Now that is why I'll have to go and change my data source. So I'm going to my analyze tab. Under that, change data source, and now I'll have to increase this table in such a way that even this column gets added. So I select it again, and I just do a control shift right, control shift down, such that it picks up everything. Okay, that's it. Click OK. Okay, let's do it here because there are dependent data there. There are multiple sheets, multiple pivots, and there is correspondingly data available. So it's not creating. Let's try doing it for this. Okay, so I go to analyze, change data source. Okay, now it got updated here, right? Now if I come and see here, see, you can see there is a new column got R sales got updated. Okay, but it will not get updated unless and until you come and refresh your pivot. Okay, so I say refresh, right click, refresh pivot. Okay, so let's say I want to drag this column as well, R sales. Your data gets updated now. Okay, so that's how you change your data source within a pivot. Once your data gets changed, you will have to change it accordingly. Okay, so I just uncheck that and see the next option. Okay, so the next option is calculated field. Calculated field in pivot. Okay, so what is calculated field all about is, now I have some columns here. Let's say sales, and I just don't want this. I'll delete this. Okay, now I have a column called sales column. Let's say I want to analyze some data called discount sales. I want another column, but I don't want to disturb my source data. Without including anything in your source data, if you want to include a separate column inside your pivot, then we go for calculated field. Okay, so you create your own column inside your pivot for your calculation purpose, but at the same time you are not disturbing your source database. Then you go for calculated field. Okay, so let's create a calculated field. Now I click on my pivot, go to analyze, and this, right, there's something called calculated field. Click on that. Now I'm going to create a new field called discount sales, and that is 10% of my total sales, let's say. Okay, so I take sales column, so I go double click on this, and my formula should be sales into 10%, right? So star 10% stands for 0.1, so I give that. So your new column called discount sales will have 10% of sales for each and every row present inside your database. It will virtually take a column called details and keep it for your reference such that you can use inside your pivot, but it will not be there in your source database, right? So I click OK. Now you can see another column got created called T sales. Okay. Now you can just check that and see. Let's say I'll remove this sales. Okay, and come back and see here. You have a column called D sales, right? So this is 10% of your sales, right? Here it's 750. It will be 75 here. Okay, so just like that, if you want to analyze some data present in your pivot and you want to analyze within the pivot table without disturbing your source data, then you go for calculated field. Okay, that is what calculated field is all about. You can create any huge complex logic. Okay, when you're creating a column, it need not be only simple logic. You can create any bigger formula and create a column such that you can analyze that column at a later point of stage, right? Yes, so that's about calculated field. Now once your uh, pivot table is ready, next thing is to, let's say, create a chart on top of it, right? So let's see how to create a pivot chart. Okay, so pivot chart is a very easy option. Just that you go to analyze, you'll have an option called pivot chart. Okay, and in the advanced versions you will have something called recommended pivot tables and recommended pivot charts, right? So what is recommended pivot chart is, let's say I'll just click on this. Okay, so you can see what and all pivot tables you can create with your available data. So that's what your recommended pivot table says, right? So we have created sum of sales by product and invoice number, right? Product and sales representative and then invoice number, right? Now you can even do sum of price by sales rep, sum of sales by product, sum of sales by whatever, sum of sales by price by product. So whatever options which can be possible to create a pivot table, your pivot table, recommended pivot table, will actually suggest you such that you need not go drag drop all the columns. With just one click you can create your pivot table, right? So I've already created a pivot table. Now I want to create a pivot chart. So just for simplicity purpose, I'll remove this invoice number here back. So I have only product and sales rep and the total sales. Okay. Now I will just interchange this product, let it be in the rows, sales rep, let it be in the columns. Right. So I've interchanged it. I'm going to create a pivot chart. I click on this such that you get all the available charts here, right? Here I have column chart, I have line chart, pie chart, all different kind of charts. I'll go with a simple column chart, right? So I click OK and your chart is ready. Okay, so just with one click you get this pivot chart. Okay, so here you see you have different products here: Alpine, Carlotta, Belen, Majestic, and Quad, and the total sales performed in different region or for different sales rep I want, right? So that we want. So each and every color represent each sales representative. So it comes this way, right? So I just want to do some basic modifications here. I want to hide all this, so I can say right click, hide all fields. Now I want these data labels to be displayed here. I don't want a column field here. You can always insert data labels. So I say data, I click on this plus arrow and this options will appear, data labels. Okay, so click on data labels and select this. I want data labels to be on top, right? I'll say data labels however you want, right? So you can just select it that way. So I just check that such that data labels will be appeared here. Okay, so it will just display on top of the bar what is the amount of sales performed for that particular bar or whatever. So in this case, I can even remove this, just clicking on delete such that it gets removed. You can insert a title for your chart, that is chart title. I select chart title. By default, it comes on top. I can just come and say uh, sales chart, right? Yes. So that's what your pivot chart is. Pivot chart is completely linked with your pivot table. Whenever your pivot table changes, your pivot chart will automatically get changed. Okay. So let's say I drag my invoice number to my rows once again. Now instantly your pivot chart gets changed as well. But as there is huge data, it gets little messy there. But that's all. So I'll just remove that. So your chart gets updated automatically whenever you insert or delete things, right? So that's about pivot table and pivot chart, right? So finally, one last example, I'll create chart or I'll create a pivot table for dates, date based sales, right? So my data is in sheet one. I go here, I'll create one more chart. I say alt NB. Alternately, I'm going to create it a new worksheet. Let's say, okay, fine. Now I want to see date based sales, right? So I drag date here and I drag sales here. Okay, so I say sales in my values. Okay, now as this is getting grouped, it is coming like this. I say right click on this column. I just ungroup that first. Okay, this is the report which I'm looking for. Date based sales for each and every date present in my database, how much sales has been performed. Now I don't want date based sales, I want month based sales. Right, for a particular month, I want to see how much sales has been performed. Okay, so I can right click on this date column and say group. Okay, and here comes a window. Okay, wherein you can select your required things. I want to be displaying with months and years as well, so I press Control and select multiple options here, years and months. Right, now I click OK. Now your data changes accordingly. For 2016, in May, this much sales has been performed. Okay, and correspondingly for each and every month, whatever sales have been performed will be displayed accordingly, right? So this is how you can create a pivot for date based sales, right? So date based or month based, quarter based, yearly based, or however you want your uh, report to be displayed. You can group them and ungroup them accordingly, right? And you can even filter it accordingly. You have filter options present. Okay, so I can select here. You can sort oldest to newest. You can newest to oldest, and you can filter. Okay, so you can apply whatever filter options you have. Date filters. If you go to text filters, you can apply value filters as well. Now you see here. Uh, I have values here, right? In my sales. Let's say I want to see sales which is only greater than 600. Okay, uh, something like that. I want to see sales which is greater than 600 whenever it happens. So I can go to value filter. I say greater than or equals to. Okay, now I can give sum of sales greater than or equals to 600. I want to see only that data, right? Now when it happened in 2016, May, July, August, my sales has reached more than 600. I can instantly see that and display it accordingly, right? So that's how you can apply filters. You can have all kind of filters here. Value filters, under that you can see greater than, less than, between, equals to, and so on, right? You can see top 10 sales, top 5 sales, whatever those options which is applicable to your normal filters. You can apply all those filters here as well. Same way date filters. Okay, so yesterday, today, next week, this week, whatever, next month, this month, next year, this year, all those options will be available here. you can just select whichever appropriate, and you can filter your pivot table accordingly, right? So that's a lot about pivot tables. We have seen different options. We have seen what is slicers. We have seen timeline. We have seen calculated field. We have seen pivot chart, how to create pivot chart. We saw how to uh, give under design options. What are the options? We have seen how to create multiple pivot tables with one pivot table. We have seen we have created multiple pivot tables like this here, and we have linked multiple pivot tables with the filters available, and we have seen what is value field settings options, where you can go change your uh, field accordingly, sum of sales or count of sales or whatever it is, right? So that's all about pivot tables. See you next.